yourself comfortable. Hi everybody, good morning. So yeah, I mean, we're going to start with a premise, which is that basically humans are the product of their context. We're the product of the environments that we sit in, the situations that we find ourselves in. But also, like every other creature on the planet, our contexts are also the products of us. It's our relationships with our environment that we have to look at. And we often have these narratives, very binary narratives of everything that we find, that something is implicitly bad or it's harmful. It's a very binary notion, or it's somehow good. We have good people and good things and bad things. But actually that's complete bullshit. It's actually about the context in which that thing is placed and whether it's in a context of harm. So if you take a plastic bottle or a plastic bag and you put it in a turtle's belly, then it's obviously not very good. However, when it's at the supermarket, it is implicitly useful. So it's all about how we actually move things from the context of harm to the context of benefit, and how we relate to the world around us. And with respect to how we relate to the world around us, if we're looking at the contexts in which we exist, one of the most important contexts that we have to look at is our collective myths and our collective stories. I put the dinosaur up here because we call Tyrannosaurus Rex king of the dinosaurs for a reason. In the same way that we call the lion the king of the jungle. It's not that it is actually a superior being or a superior species, it more reflects a kind of projection of our own ideas of what good or superior is in reality. And this relates to the nature also in which we relate to power. The most forms of power that we have as humans on the planet largely relate from decontextualisation. We remove things from nature, we remove information, we even disconnect words from their origin and their meanings. We take little pictures and snapshots of riots, and we don't show the greater image of the whole nation state. You know, I was shoe shopping 2 streets away from riots on Tahrir Square. A photographer, when I told her that story, she said, "That's nothing. Nobody wanted the photo I took of a couple having a picnic whilst the riot was happening behind them." I told another friend. He said, "That's nothing. I've seen boys sat smoking shisha pipes, looking at the TV screen at the violence that's happening directly behind them." The proximity of these things, the stories that we tell, this abstraction allows for a narrative of control. You can look at it in the same way with things like slavery or the separation of ourselves, even when we were colonized, and that's a long time ago, so far ago that we've forgotten it, but we were decontextualized. We were taken from our land, we were taken from our stories, from our history, from our religion. All of these things, all of these separations, all of these cuts allowed for power and control to manifest in this manner. And this is what the dinosaur represents. It's nature raw in tooth and claw, the ability to grab and sever and cut and thrash things up into tiny little pieces in order to render them into energy. But I would posit that that is not a good role model for us to have, because the dinosaur isn't around anymore. I would urge you instead not to consider the badger, but the mushroom. The mushroom as a role model is billions of years old. David will go into a lot more detail on this later on. But it's still here. It survived 5 mass extinctions, and in each of those mass extinctions, it just looked up and went, "Oh, yum, more food." And then it built the ecosystem again. Now that's a being you can learn from. That's a being we can work with. That's a being that can really teach us something as a role model. And how it operates is it contextualizes things. It establishes relationships with itself and its environment. It exchanges nutrients. It exchanges information. It has a deep relationship with what we would now describe as nature. And it's informing these connections and informing these deeper relationships, we can actually reconnect with a more natural form of power, where we actually support things to do what they would naturally do best and enable them to help us get the fuck out of this mess. Because ultimately, when we look at all of these contexts of harm, I have to excuse my language, I'm very passionate about it. But because we've done this, you know, we look at carbon in the atmosphere. Carbon we're carbon-based life. All life on Earth is carbon-based. So if we're going to take the carbon out of the atmosphere, we shouldn't be looking at sinking it and locking it away. We should just be looking at how we can cycle it more, how we can create more life. And this is what the mushroom does. It converts all waste to food, all trash to food, makes everything useful, and constructs habitats for all beings on the planet. And I would argue that this is the kind of thing that we should be doing. Probably on time. So how do we enter into this space? How do we even begin with all of this complexity? And I would argue that instead of planning and coming from these narratives of control and abstraction, which is already a part of our flawed relationship, instead we just have to look at how we can reconnect with one another and recontextualize ourselves within our communities and with nature itself. And the way that I've started to explore this, and we've started to explore this, is through a game which we call Contextual. And the idea is really to look at how we can just play together to build a kind of reality. We don't really have any rules. In fact, I would argue that perhaps there shouldn't be any rules. There should only be the intention, the shared intention, to work together to build a kind of reality. Because as soon as you get into accounts, as soon as you get into numbers, as soon as you get into the tokenization of things, this is all the same problem that we once entered into. You're abstracting the data, you're abstracting the information, you're decontextualizing it, and this is creating the same cyclical problem over and over again. Play, incidentally, is derived from the words to cultivate and nurture, and game is from, I think, German Gamen, which is people together. So when we play games, it's just basically how do we cultivate each other? How do we, cultivate all of the beings around us and everybody that we're engaging. So we're urging people to come together and play a new game. We've been experimenting with this for some time. It started with the idea of a construction toy that you play with, which at the moment takes the form of beeswax and sticks. So it's very accessible and anybody can engage with it, play with it, build their own, extend the kit. You can take natural materials and likewise extend it further. You can even incorporate just bits of trash and waste that you find lying around and make engineered parts, components, wheels, bring electronic equipments in and create your own designs and new things. And ostensibly that's just about play and just coming together to play and explore without necessarily even having any expectation, which for me as an inventor is already very exciting. But the next level is even more exciting because you can then take whatever structures and constructions you make through play and come together as a community, take the waste around you and the trash that exists around you, and you can take plastic bottles and sticks and a little bit of heat and some basic accessible tools, and you can make things like this dome I'm building on my rooftop, which you could build further structures around, which you could grow vines around, grow shade, grow organic structures, create habitats, in other words. And also various other things which you might find useful for yourself and your community. So, and this has allowed me to build all sorts of different things. The stories from Dahab, I showed a social innovation space, how they could make their own furniture using plastic bottles and sticks. They gathered the community together and started making this furniture together. Eventually, they started to construct the idea of an eco-camp, which they're now trying to build at Abu Ghulum. But the more they played the game, the more they realized that their original energies of trying to plan and construct spaces and processes to encourage social innovation locally were not as effective as just going to people, playing the game with them, talking to them about their needs, and then showing them how to play their game. So now they're going just into Bedouin villages in St. Catherine and various other places in Egypt and just showing people what to do and how to play. And different solutions are now evolving, different uses for this waste are created. Yesterday we played the game here. We showed people, we had a very interesting, well I say we showed people, I mean we planted the seeds and we showed what was initially possible through growing the game locally and through just connecting around this idea. It's been a pleasure to connect with Carl and David and Ed, who will also be talking later, and look at how our stories weave together. We've started to explore how we can use these structures to grow mushrooms and grow habitats and create seed libraries and seed banks, and just have people come together and play and build wild and crazy ideas, and further look also at how we might take local materials and use these local materials instead, because sticks are not so abundant in London, but cardboard is, and plastic bottles are still possible to find. So I will now hand over to Carl, but we're just at the beginning of this. It's a growing thing, it's an evolving thing, and if you're interested to join us, this is really as open as it can possibly be. We just want to pass it, help people grow it, and urge everybody to just think about how we can connect and play with this idea of just building a kind of reality together.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, so yesterday, we had a workshop with 3 component parts. So we learned the context craft game, both the modelling side of it and then the actual building of stuff that's stable. And then we had myceliate with David Satori talking about mycelium networks and how we can grow mycelium. And then we also had Ed looking at seed banks. So what we're trying to do is actually combine the 3. So potentially using context craft to build structures made of trash that can then house mycelium networks. So we can actually grow these structures, at large scale, and then potentially with seed, creating seed banks again with the same technologies. So I'm just going to start with a little clip from yesterday. David doesn't know this is coming, but here you go.
So what's the cyanescent? This is a psychoactive species. It's a native to the UK, and it's found in woodlands. It's fairly common. If you know where to look out for it, and it's been shown to be able to break down all of these different substances. So, for example, persistent organophosphates, they're normally used in
Sorry, it's just getting to the speaker.
So, psilocybin cyanescent. This is a psychoactive species. It's a native to the UK, and it's found in woodlands. It's fairly common, if you know where to look out for it. And it's been shown to be able to break down all of these different substances. So, for example, persistent organophosphates. They're normally used in fertilizers, pesticides, and so on. And when it's persistent, it means that if it was sprayed into soil in 2004, in 2024 it's still probably going to be there unless some other creature comes along to break it down. So these things have, it's very difficult to break them down, and they stay persistent in the soil for a long time. So other things like flame retardants, softeners, adhesives, they can get broken down by this. Nitrates as well, so excessive nitrate pollution by agriculture, that can then be absorbed by the mycelium and then broken down to form mushrooms. And then DNMP, so different chemical weapons, biological weapons that can actually succumb to this mushroom as well. Now, if we zoom in a bit closer, psilocybin, so the actual psychoactive compound in magic mushrooms, notice it has that P in the upper left-hand corner. That's a phosphorus atom. And glyphosate, for example, also has a P there. So when that fungus detects some kind of chemical similarity between them, it's going to tear up that molecule, get out that phosphorus atom, and use it to build psilocybin. So in a way, it's going to be turning these nasty, deadly molecules into molecules of spiritual transcendence. And this raises another issue. The legalization of psychoactive fungi isn't just to do about our own mental health. It's about the health of ecosystems. So by also campaigning for the legalization of these mushrooms, we are also giving ourselves the opportunity to break down these nasty chemicals that have consistently been polluting and poisoning ourselves and our ecosystems.
So yeah, it's all connected, and I think that's a brilliant example of that. the mental health of ourselves, the mental health of our environment, they're just the same thing. So, I don't know if you've seen The Mushroom Suit. Who's seen this? So we've got a problem with burying the dead. Apparently they're now thinking of putting people alongside the motorways. I think this is a better alternative. So, and a quote from Jay, I want to be eaten by a mushroom house that I have grown. I want to be food and I want to be habitat. So this is where we're at. This is where we're at. So just to finish with the context craft stuff. So Jay's been championing the analog version of this game. I'm looking at the digital version. So how do we actually, this is Minecraft. Who's played Minecraft? So a few of you. Minecraft in real life, which is kind of a similar sort of thing. So this is Fologram. Fologram allows us to basically put anything in that you can put in a 3D package like this inside your view. So with augmented reality, you're able to basically put any 3D, even very complicated hyperbolic geometry can be explored now with these technologies. So bespoke walls where you're actually placing each brick in a different position. Before, you'd have to actually get a robot to actually put that in place, but now you can actually use augmented reality to actually create these things in situ. So we're using the same technologies with Context Craft. We want to basically learn how to make these structures virtually before we bring them into the real. So these are some of the shots from the game. This is the work from Marius, one of my team at Ravensbourne. So it's this idea of building on other people's designs. It's a way of gamifying the process. Whatever we can not do in the analog, or what we're struggling to learn in the analog, we can actually do in the digital, in the mixed reality. And we want to really, get people to use their hands again. Making things with your hands is massively in decline. We want to be device agnostic, so we want to work on cheap smartphones as well as augmented reality. We don't want to cut people out of the process. We're using AI to actually evaluate the structural capacity of these designs, because you don't want something that's going to break as soon as it's built. We can also evaluate the material costs, the carbon costs of those structures that you're about to build. We're obviously allowing people to explore different materials. You get a reward system for building on other people's designs. It also enables you to understand when 3D printing may be appropriate. A lot of the problem with 3D printing is that it actually is very wasteful because you don't have a process like this. And also you can use AI to actually see how structurally sound a lot of these designs are. So really interested in the fact that Extinction Rebellion adopted the same acronym XR as all the immersive technologies. So virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, cinema, all the immersive technologies come under the term XR, which stands for extended or cross reality. So this was sort of a light bulb moment, thinking, what can XR do for XR? So what can these technologies do for our Extinction Rebellion? How can we use technologies in a positive way? Technology has got such a bad rap, and for good reason, because it's incredibly terribly designed, based on addiction, based on dopamine. And I think, just to finish, context itself is imagination. We've got to move away from this content-based model where we're just consuming information to a context-based model where we start to change the way we perceive the world as the content. And I think virtual reality only exists to show us that this reality has become very virtual and abstracted, linking back to what Jay was saying. And in the same light, Disneyland only exists to show that the rest of America is real. Thank you very much.